Okay, I'd like to welcome Lindsay Davenport, who is 4 times year-end WTA #1 player. And let's see if I got the years right. 98, 2001, 2004, and 2005. And she has won 3 Grand Slam singles titles. She has been ranked #1 in the world for 98 weeks in singles and 32 weeks in doubles. And she has a Olympic gold medal, which, I don't know. That's pretty awesome resume, Lindsay, I must admit. But I want to start with the beginning, and I want to start with the beginning of your career. Your family was a volleyball family. Your father played in the Olympics, your mom, your sisters, but you chose tennis. How did that happen?
We always laugh about it in my family because it was by such accident that I ended up playing tennis. You don't really start playing volleyball till, especially back then in the 80s, till about 13 or so. I think now it's a little bit younger, but when I was like 5, I was the youngest of 3. And my parents were doing everything they could to get me out of the house after school. So they threw me in soccer and I got kicked on the shin and had to get stitches. So I never wanted to go back out on a soccer field. They put me in swim and I was a blonde. My hair turned green. So then I cried and didn't want to go back in the pool. So then my mom tried an after-school tennis clinic, and it just was one of those things where it just really kind of resonated with me at a young age. I had a lot of friends that played. And so pretty soon, all my afternoons after school were going to this tennis club and trying to find people to play, going to clinics. And I just really never looked back. My parents tried 2 times to switch me to volleyball when I was like 12 and 14. But I held firm. I knew what I wanted to do, which is incredibly lucky at such a young age.
Well, and at a young age also, I think you had a coach named Robert Lansdorp who has a very distinct style of coaching. And I mean, what did he do? How did he impact your game?
That was another one of these things that so much of my success, I really put down to luck. And I was playing, my mom put me in, junior team tennis where you play different clubs. And so one day I went out there and played against a girl. My mom, always super friendly, was never really into the results. Got to talking to my opponent's mom, turned out to be Stephanie Lansdorp and her mom, Susie Lansdorp, Robert's wife and daughter. And Susie was the one who said to my mom, you should come and bring Lindsay to my husband's academy. We're trying to get more young players my daughter's age to keep her playing. So that would be great. So the next week I went off to this academy at a different club, but still, about 20 minutes away from where we lived. And that really changed everything for me. I had all of a sudden this experienced coach who was putting in a really big effort for the younger players because of his daughter, and would take us in these special groups. And all of a sudden, from the ages of about 9 or 10 on up until 15, I learned discipline. I learned the greatest technique. I learned repetition. We're going to hit 100 forehands, and you've got to hit it within about a foot of this target time and time and time again. But I loved it, and we got along really, really well. He had actually a similar personality to my own dad, who was very big and very loud, but it was always more bark than anything else. And so I could kind of see through, yeah, exactly. And I could see through that at a very young age. I just kind of roll my eyes, oh, Robert, and he'd kind of giggle at me and we'd go back to work. And it was some of my greatest years. And he had this academy. There was only 5 courts. We were obviously on the lowest one, being the youngest players. And you look down and all of a sudden you see the top court and you see some of the best collegiate players or some of the players that were coming from the pro tour, the 18 and unders. And I would look at them and say, well, I want to make it to that court. So, I just kept working hard and, had a really good time doing it.
Well, and he also coached Tracy and Maria Sharapova. But all of you students had hit such a clean ball. Did you just get that basket of balls and did you just hit like 1,000 balls to get that timing, or what?
Like 1,001, like every day. The academy was all drills, like ball after ball. And in your lesson, always joked in my 60-minute lesson, I would hit about 40 minutes of forehands, about 10 minutes of backhands, about 5 minutes of volleys, and about 3 minutes of serves. The rest was picking up the balls. But it was like just you would hit thousands and thousands of ground strokes till that stroke became exactly what he wanted to see, until that ball landed exactly where he wanted it to land. And guess what? The next day you would do it all over again. And It's interesting, for some players that would be really boring. For whatever reason, for my mindset, I didn't mind doing that. And, it was that technique is so important at a young age. And that was something that was able to hold up in my career the whole time.
Well, I think, when I look at a lot of young players who came up, they had a parent, or they had an uncle, or they had, a coach that really pushed them. But you're one of the rare ones that you had people that were resources in your career, but you're one of the people that I feel like you had a clear vision, and you had that desire and that discipline inside, and you used to drive yourself to Roberts to get some lessons, right? Did you feel that you had that natural, hunger right from the start?
It's interesting. It's different personalities, right? And we were an incredibly close family, but I never felt that comfortable, like discussing, my forehand's not feeling good or anything like that at the dinner table. My parents were amazing because they were athletes. And again, they were all volleyball players. They know everything there is to know about volleyball. I have my mom now with my daughter. I'm like, you handle the volleyball. But they were smart enough to know they knew nothing about tennis, and they had no idea what was in store in that sport. And so it kind of just fell onto me. And as you mentioned, I had some integral people around me. Robert Lansdorp was the first one. Then was Lynn Raleigh, who was in charge of the USTA of the girls' side of their discipline and in their instruction. And she took a liking to me, and we formed an incredibly close relationship. I'm still very close with her to this day. Then it was Robert Vantoff, who was my coach for over 10 years on that transition from the juniors into the pros. And those three people, I always say my career would never be what it was if it wasn't for them.
I met you through Lynn Raleigh, I remember, in Palm Springs for the first time, and she was with you. And you were a very successful junior player. You won the 18 Nationals and you won Junior US Open. But you talk often about the fact that it was a very insecure time for you. Can you talk about that a little more?
Yeah, it's so funny. I mean, people come into their own at different ages. And for me, I was much better at tennis than I thought I was, thought I could be. And things just kept happening in the juniors. But emotionally, I was not ready for any of that. And certainly confidence-wise, nowhere near. And I had players come before me, obviously, in generations before, but even Jennifer Capriati was my same age. And here she was at 13, 14, 15, just killing it on the pro tour. And I just would watch in awe. I don't know how she's doing this. I'm the same age. I'm trying to finish high school. I'm trying to play the juniors. And this was a lot to handle even for me. It took me really until truly my mid-20s before I really felt comfortable in everything that I was doing in my career. And I won a major at 22, and that scared the lights out of me for the next few years. And I did well, but I wasn't comfortable necessarily with everything that went with it for a number of years until I got older. And I wish I could have maybe played a little bit longer. My body just kind of gave out, but certainly it helped for me to be more confident, to be more mature, and to just be more knowledgeable and enjoy it a little bit more than I did maybe in the beginning.
And you talk about your career. I was dismayed when I read that you had a 20-year career. I couldn't believe, I didn't realize that you had played so many years. And you also played 11 Fed Cups and 3 Olympics, and you won a gold medal in the Olympics in '96. Okay, you gotta tell me, I've never won a gold medal in the Olympics, so please tell me how that felt.
Oh gosh, that kind of came out of nowhere. And I had just turned
No, you're just lucky. Lindsay, you're just lucky, as you said before.
But I was only 20, and I don't know if I was seated somewhere between like 10 and 16. It wasn't like this was supposed to happen. At that time, the United States every country only got 3 singles players in. And it was a battle just to make the team. And in that particular year, it was before Venus and Serena had made their way to the top. There was a lot of us all kind of battling for it. And it came down until like the very last tournament of who would make it. And I ended up kind of fitting in at the number 3 slot to even make the Olympic team. So that was like a dream come true. And my dad, being an Olympian, that was just the fact that I was going to be in Atlanta. It was huge for my family. So then just getting there and being on the team with some of my best friends like Mary Jo and like Monica, we had the best time ever. Walking into the opening ceremonies to that Olympics was my career highlight. And it's so hard to explain, but there was a very steep ramp getting into the stadium, and we got to the top, and I'll never forget this. Truly, Billie Jean was like, "Oh my God, I don't know if I can make it down there." Like literally, it was so steep. So Monica took her arm on one side, and I took it on the other, and Mary Jo was right there, and we all walked in together, kind of clutching arms. And to this stadium, 100,000 people just going crazy. I remember just being completely overwhelmed. That was like a college experience to me, getting to stay in the Olympic Village and not having the focus just on tennis. I felt like, I'd go play my match and come back and have a lot of fun. The week kind of went on, and after I won my semifinal match, this was really kind of a pivotal moment in my whole career. Billie Jean sat me down for like a good hour. Most people in dealing with me didn't really hold me accountable. And in my mind, I've always been kind of like a worst case scenario thinker. And I remember I said to her, I said, "Can you believe no matter what, I'm going to get a silver medal tomorrow?" And she went, "Oh, you come over here. You sit down right here." And we talked for she sat me down for almost an hour saying, "You have to be aware of what's happening tomorrow. You have to be aware of what this could do." And really forced me to talk about stuff that would really normally make me uncomfortable. Like, no, I'm happy. I'm going to get a silver medal. And she's like, "No, you have to push yourself to do bigger and better things." That was the first time anyone had done that to me. And it obviously worked out the next day. It was an incredible moment, super emotional. I couldn't believe that it would happen to me. And I still look back on those pictures and really can't believe that it is me on the podium with the medal.
You're so funny. I wish that I had somebody like Billie Jean before every final, every Grand Slam that I played.
No,
Right?
exactly.
Because I'm like the world's greatest runner-up of Grand Slams. I think of all the times I've gone.
You had a few that
No,
you won.
no, but but I lost more finals than I won. No, but that is a great story. You turned pro in 1993, and then you won the Olympics in 1996. But the first year that you were ranked number one at the end of the year was 98. And there's a really cute story that goes along with it, because you had never been ranked number one, and it came down to Filderstadt, didn't it? And you told me this one story before, but I'd like you to tell it again.
Yeah, it was the year before I hit number one in doubles, and I was surprised how much that meant to me. I couldn't believe that happened. So then here we go into 98. I had a phenomenal summer where I won 3 lead-in tournaments to the US Open. There was a lot of pressure on me, or a lot of expectations maybe, for me going into the US Open. Won my first major there, which was a dream come true. The US Open was always the one that I wanted to win the most, being an American. It was the easiest one for me to watch growing up. So that was a lot. So then we go into the fall. There's a few tournaments left, and there was this great tournament in Filderstadt. It's now played in Stuttgart, the Porsche tournament. And Martina Hingis and I were kind of neck and neck for the number one ranking. So it was really coming down to who did better that week. So it was Friday, quarterfinal day. She happened to play before me, and I was waiting to go on in the locker room, and Martina loses. So no matter what happens the rest of the week, on Monday, I'll be the number one ranked player. I certainly didn't expect Hingis to lose. I, in my mind, thought I'm going to have to win this tournament. So she loses, and now I'm next on to play. And I can't stop crying. So I go and I hide in the bathroom stall. And it's this very small club where we used to play. And I'm in the bathroom stall, crying and trying to get it together. And I could hear people looking and calling my name. And I remember going, I can't come out. I can't come out. I don't want to go on the court right now. I can't believe this. And I walk out, and my coach Robert is there. And he was kind of crying too, but he knew I had to go play. So he gave me a big hug, and he goes, just don't worry about it. Just do your best out there. I can't believe this. And so I walked on the court. I never will forget this, kind of wiping tears, because it just seemed impossible. There's some players you talk to, and at a very young age, they know this is what I want. I literally wanted to go to college on a tennis scholarship, hopefully Stanford. I had never even had the courage to dream that big. So when stuff like that would happen to me, it was like almost overwhelming for me to process. And that was definitely one of those moments.
That's really interesting that you answered that. One of the questions I was going to ask you, when did you think that you were going to be great or you could be number one? Because I'm telling you, all the other women who have been ranked number one at the end of the year that I talked to, they knew at 10 or they knew at 12 or they knew when they were 6 or, but you, which just shows you're a realist and you're humble and, it came your way because, and you earned it, for sure. You answered my question. I was going to say, which one of the Grand Slams meant the most to you? So can you expound on that a little bit more, the US Open?
Absolutely. It was always growing up, it was like Labor Day weekend. I would always tell like my parents or my sisters, like, just don't bother me. This is where I really get to watch tennis on TV. And I would sit in front of the TV like all weekend watching as much as I could. I remember when you beat Monica Seles, I swear that was like, I remember sitting there that match and that kind of, those matches, that's when I was starting to really get into tennis, really kind of like inspiring me to go to that next level. I played there first in the juniors at 13. I got my first wild card in the main draw at 15 by winning the 18 and under nationals. So that was the one that I had the most experience at. That was the one, kind of out on the back court those first few years. You felt at home. Yeah, definitely. One of my greatest memories, truly. The last match I played on the outer courts was the third round in 1993. Played Amanda Coetzer, who, we only seeded 16 players at the time, and she was one of those seeds from, 9 to 16. And it was out on one of the back courts that still had stands. And I remember walking out there and it was packed. And I remember going, oh my God, this is gonna be so fun. And they were for me. I was able to get at that time, like just a huge win with a lot of fans that really helped me. Last singles match I played out there, but it was truly one of the most memorable ones because it was so fun. And I just was like, this is where I want to win more than anything, and was able to do it.
When I was looking at your record and I saw that you had played for 20 years, I was kind of looking at some of the players that you compete against. Yeah. You were in a golden era. I mean, that the players, the champions that ran through those 20 years. You had at the end Serena and Venus, and you had Henin, and you had Clijsters, and you had Jennifer Capriati, and you had Hingis, and I mean, you had the cream of the crop. Which one of those players, those champions that you had to compete against, sort of had your number or sort of gave you the toughest time? Yeah,
I missed you by 2 years. And I would have been fun
God,
to play you.
I feel like I'm so much older than you. Okay.
No, not at all. I remember obviously watching you so much. It was interesting. First when I first came up, I played Martina in singles before she retired from the singles game. Steffi, the player who for those 5 years or so in the mid 90s, like I could barely win games off Conchita Martinez, and she would just go out there and just toy with me. I would rather play, and I say this all the time, Graf than I would Conchita, because she would hit this moon ball and this drop shot and this low slice. And I remember I started having practices purely to play Conchita, to play a player like Gabby, to play someone who could just maneuver me around with like a slice, make me try and bend down, make me move. So for a few years, literally that was all I practiced. I could handle people that tried to hit hard. I couldn't handle the players with all the variety. Finesse. And I remember like always looking at the draw like, oh, please don't have Conchita anywhere near me.
That is so funny.
I know.
I wouldn't have expected to say her. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. You talk about all these players. I got to play, Steffi a bunch of times, Serena a bunch of times. It was kind of a crazy like stretch that I had where there was a few years there where it was who's going to be next. Steffi was on her way out, and it's like, oh, here are Venus and Serena. Good luck for the rest of the tour.
You just couldn't get any rest there. I mean, okay, they left, some of the champions left, but then some greater ones came. Did you play Martina Navratilova?
Yeah, I played her in 93 in Oakland. I think literally a few weeks before she was done playing. And it was great. I mean, all of these players, it was like a dream come true. Yeah, I played almost I mean, up until the last few years, I played a lot of the players who would ever become number one. So I always feel kind of like lucky, and then kind of like, oh, I wish I was maybe in a different generation. But maybe not. Who knows?
Of the 4 years that you were ranked number one, what year do you think you actually played your best? When were you the best tennis player?
You know, it's funny because a number of those years where I finished one, I didn't win a major, which isn't that great. In 05, I was playing really good tennis, lost the finals of the Australian, lost the final of Wimbledon, finished the year one, but didn't win either.
Yeah, but you won 10 tournaments one year. Was that 04 or 05?
One of those.
That's awesome.
But I couldn't win a major, which is really what I wanted to do. In 2000, I won the Australian, lost in the final of Wimbledon, lost in the final of the US Open, and didn't finish the year number one. So, you know, there was all these players like Hingis and Venus. And for a couple of those years, like we took so many of the points, and it just came down to who was going to finish that year number one. It was interesting. My Grand Slams all came between the US Open 98 and the Australian Open in 2000. So I would think in that period, I was at my best, but so were a lot of other players, and it was very tough.
Right, that's for sure. And during that time, Robert Van Hoff, I think he was a very special coach for you, and he really got you fit, didn't he? Did you guys worked a lot on the fitness part of the game with him?
That was the huge change that kind of came as I got older and kind of took stock. I mean, when I first came up, I was trying to finish high school. Then for a few years, I was kind of just didn't feel right. Even though I was doing well, I kind of felt like, man, maybe I should be in college. And so it kind of took me till almost my mid-20s till I could really like step back and say like, okay, this is actually a job. And this is actually, you know, you've got to put more time in during the day to being successful in tennis than in other things. It was also, you know, one of those things, my personality, like if someone had been there saying to me, you know, like you're going to be one, you can do it. Like I automatically almost always kind of discarded them. And with kind of Robert and also with Lynn, it was kind of like a slow process of them kind of helping me to figure it out without just saying the words. It's hard to explain, but those two had so much belief in me by just being by my side day in and day out, and they didn't have to tell me. And then, you know, we would hit little milestones along the way that just turned out to be huge in my overall belief. But fitness certainly was something, I mean, I wish at 16 or 17 I had been like, this is so important, but it didn't hit me till later.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? I feel the same. I'm so glad that now it's come around to now tennis players are more fit than ever.
Don't you think that? I think that when I see the players these days at the top, and whether you pick a Halep or an Osaka, obviously the Williams sisters, you're like, yeah, they could have picked any sport. And they would have been so good. And I truly, am a very good tennis player, not good at much else. So maybe it is lucky I played more.
Yeah, well, you know what?
Era.
And I say the same thing. I said I was a great tennis player, but that doesn't mean I was a great athlete, because you didn't need to be a great athlete to be number one 30 years ago. Now you need to be. We're going to fast forward to 2007, when you left the tour and you gave birth to Jagger, June 10th, and you gave birth, and then you came back in 2008 and played a full year. Talk to me. Nowadays, more and more moms are on the tour, but talk to me about the challenges you had with the baby and being a professional tennis player.
Yeah, you know, it was one of those things where when we found out I was pregnant, it was like the best moment of my whole life. And we were so excited and ready to kind of move on. And I was about 7 months pregnant, I think, when I said to my husband, John, like, I think I maybe want to play again. He was like, what? He's like, you're going to tell me now in like a couple months before our first child? I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I kind of miss it. And he's like, okay, well, let's just get through the last few months. Let's have hopefully a healthy baby and we'll go from there. And then things just went so fast. I actually played my first tournament 3 months after he was born.
I know.
And it just kind of moved and
you couldn't wait to get out of that house, could you?
Yeah, exactly. It was so fun though. Like all of a sudden we were like going to practice, and my husband was doing most of it with me because, you know, we just had this baby. We were like having so much fun. My mom went to Asia with me
nice.
For the first trip. We had so much fun for that year. it became much more difficult when Jagger got older. Obviously, he started walking like at 12 months. That summer, he's more mobile. John couldn't travel as much, and that didn't really feel right. My knee started to kind of act up. But honestly, we look back at that year as the most fun on tour that I ever had. And it was right after the US Open, actually, of '08. My knee was really kind of bugging me all summer. I had to pull out of singles at the Olympics. I just played the doubles in Beijing. Didn't do great at the US Open. And I was going to get my knee scoped. And the night before surgery, the doctor called to say, like, I can't do the surgery. And I'm like, what happened? He's like, well, in all your pre-surgery tests, it shows you're pregnant. I was like,
oh no.
So that was the end of my, that was the end of it. And we found out we were expecting number 2. I don't know if I could have ever played again, honestly, because of my knee, but it was exhilarating to play as a mom and to take my son everywhere. I couldn't believe I had this cute little squishy little baby.
Yeah.
And just, it seemed like a lot less pressure playing as a mom. Your focus is definitely there on the court, but off the court, there's a lot of happiness.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the pressure, and you answered it. But at the end of 2008, again, you announced then you were going to have your second child. You came back after that second child, and you played 2 doubles tournaments, young lady, and you won one of the doubles tournaments, and then that was it for you, right? So talk about that.
Well, I had agreed to play team tennis that summer. My brother-in-law was the coach, and it was like going to be in one city. I would just do a little traveling. And I'm like, yeah, I could do that. That'd be fun. So we kind of decamped to St. Louis for like 3 weeks. And we had a blast doing it. And my 2 kids, one of my good friends in tennis was running the tournament in Stanford, Kim Hall. And she was saying, I know you're playing team tennis. We don't have a great field this year. Is there any way you would come and play doubles? It's the week right after team tennis. And I was like, oh, Kim, I don't know. I was like so nervous. So I'm like, well, let me see if I can find a partner. Okay, so I asked around, and Liesl Huber, number 1 in the world in doubles, great player. She agreed to play with me, but she said, you got to play both, Stanford and San Diego. So it kind of grew more than I wanted it to, but I did play those 2.
Yeah.
Had a lot of fun, but it was never about a comeback. Gosh, I was like, no, but it was fun to get back out there. 2 kids, it was a lot. I wasn't going to do the full comeback.
Well, no, rightly so. And along with your husband, John Leach, now you have 4 kids. You know, you have Jagger, you have Lauren, Kaya, and Haven. So your plate is full, I'm sure. But then, since your retirement, you're a very respected coach and commentator, and very successful at both. And talk about those 2 roles. Those seem to be, you really put your heart and your soul into both of those roles after retirement.
Was really lucky when the fall of 2008, when I found out I was pregnant again, Tennis Channel, which was based about 45, 50 miles from my house, asked me if I had any interest in kind of coming into their studio and kind of checking it out from a commentator's point of view. That was, 12 years ago, and loved every second of working with them. And the kind of the coaching was interesting. I don't consider myself a coach at all. I considered myself someone who was there. Madison Key's agent reached out to me. I have this young player. She's 18, 19 years old. I think you guys would get along, and I think you might be able to help her kind of with this transition right now. And it just it snowballed into something that was nothing that I had expected. At that time, I had 4 little kids. But she's someone who I absolutely adore. I treat her like my 5th kid. She hates that, but I always say that. But we're incredibly close. And I feel like, was able to help her at certain points of her career, and I'm there for her to talk to. As far as the coaches that put in like the day-to-day technical work, I have so much respect for them. It is such a commitment, as you said. Yes. And it's just not one right now that's feasible for me. But I love it. And I hope to kind of, still kind of stay in the sport by whether it's commentating or helping baby players in the future. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, it is. But I want to get into the commentating a little bit more before we stop, because I feel like there are a lot of players that go out there and play by instinct and don't have a lot of analyzing of the game. But you know, I find that you're very introspective, you're very instinctive, and you articulate very, very well, and you get across to the viewer what actually is going on the court. And that's important, isn't it? And do you feel like you've grown as a commentator?
You know, it's so funny. You could poll like 100 tennis viewers, and like every single person likes to hear something different. Someone wants to hear something really fun, and other people want to hear about the strategy, or other people want to hear about, you know, what they've been doing or personal stories. So I always feel like you can't really satisfy a lot of the viewers. You've got to go with whatever style is your own style. And I don't know, I tried to look at it more from a strategic point of view. I mean, when I played, most people thought or assumed, okay, she hits really hard, she doesn't really think about what she's doing. And I'd be like, no, that's actually not true. I was limited sometimes in what I could do, but I always went out there knowing what my opponent did well and didn't do well. And so when I look at a matchup sometimes between players, okay, this is the strength, this is the weaknesses of both players. What can player A do to player B that might make the weaknesses pop out even more? Are they doing that? And then sometimes I feel completely surprised, like, oh, they didn't try and do that at all. And so I kind of try and go through the journey of a match by looking at it sometimes in that regard. It's interesting. We call all sorts of tennis. We call first round sometimes from little tournaments way across the world. You've got to figure out who these players and what their strengths are pretty quickly. And, you know, and then other times you're at the big tournaments. So trying to treat them all with respect, I've learned is important. But yeah, I think you get more comfortable and more confident as the more reps that you get in commentating, but you have to know that like there's some people that they like a certain style, and whether you fit that mold or not, you've got to just roll with whatever style you're comfortable with.
And you touched upon strategy. You know, that was a big part of your game, which leads me to ask you, what was the strength of your game? Do you think it was more the mental side or the physical side?
Well, it definitely wasn't the movement, and it definitely wasn't the mental side. So then I tried to do everything else pretty well. But, you know, there was
But how can you say that? I think the mental side, you were, okay, well,
sometimes
maybe I didn't watch it.
No, I was just, you know, I would get really down on myself. A lot of that came from insecurity, and people can't relate, but I would think like I'd miss shots, and what would go through my mind is, oh, these people watching here think I'm terrible. Not, okay, here we go. What can I do to be different? I always was afraid of like everybody judging me, whether it be the people in the stands, or maybe it's a viewer at home watching on TV. Maybe it was the commentator, who knows? And so I was always way too concerned with that.
Self-conscious. Yeah.
Yes. And that would like go through my mind sometimes in matches, which seems so silly now when you're kind of removed, like who cares? You're going to have a bad day. You know, I felt like I could strike the ball truly better than most players out there, almost anybody. So now how could I get myself in a position to be able to hit off my front foot and hit that way more often? I worked a lot on my serve. I didn't want to be caught having to defend second serves a lot. How do I get out of that pattern? How do I get the best at first strike tennis? A lot of returns I would practice, a lot of serves, and a lot of trying to control the court from the middle. Certainly there was players, all of a sudden Kleisters and Enna came up in those early 2000 years. And that was the first time I was like, whoa, these two, they move so well. They can get kind of any ball that I hit. They defend really well, but they are really quick to turn defense into offense. And that was like, okay, I got to try and figure that out. So there was a few challenges, obviously different playing styles that I dealt with. But those two, all of a sudden, they played a different style than I was used to in the 90s. And that took a little while to get used to as well.
Again, those an example of being a great athlete. They would have been great. Yep. You know, they had everything. This is the Chris Evert WTA World #1. And so I guess my last question to you is, what does it mean to be part of the WTA #1 club?
You know, all those things, they kind of get overwhelming when you then see all the players' names, or you see all the players in one group. And it's amazing. Honestly, bigger than any of my dreams could have ever allowed me to think was possible. And I feel so crazy lucky to be involved with this sport. We have by far the leading female sport in the whole world. I was able to have such a great career from the players that really started it all in the 70s, yourself included, obviously Billie Jean and Martina, that whole group. And we're all still like killing it around the world. And this generation that's playing now is phenomenal. I'm totally flattered to even be in this group with all these amazing legends.
No, I get it. I feel the same way. And I just want to thank you. I enjoyed our talk, and I appreciate so much your humbleness. You're a great champion, and thank you for your contribution to tennis, even, you know, up until now. It's been a wonderful life, I'm sure, for you. And stay involved in tennis, because we love to see you on the tube.
Thanks, guys.